Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox with me, Nick Dixon, and of course Paul Cox from GB News and many other places. The People's Gammon, as he's sometimes called. How you doing, Paul?
I'm all right, mate. I'm okay. It's as we record a beautiful sunny day here in the British Isles, and I'd like to personally thank global warming. Thank you very
We're doing
much.
weather updates now. Beautiful day here, and temperatures are looking. You sounded like so much like you could do weather there. Radio weather, I could see you doing, and if
No problem
or
at all.
traffic reports. And if you are heading to the M25, I could see you doing. And also, you've dressed as a WWF referee from the 90s. You dressed as an old school boxing referee.
I've got this is my Charlie Sheen look. I think I've got kind of HIV and a drug addiction. No,
Right.
I've just. It's a loose shirt. It's warm, man. I've been playing golf. Life's moving on for me.
Nice. I thought boxing ref. You thought Charlie Sheen, but it's good to have that good self-image. Or is that a good self-image? Because as you say, later years, not so much.
I'll go with the referee,
You
please.
pick the ref. And just quick apology to anyone for some of the audio cock-ups on some of the episodes. Doesn't matter whose fault it was, but we got it sorted. It was a technicality, so we've sorted all the episodes now. If you had an issue with that on audio, thank you so much for your support. Go to nickdixon.net for full episodes. I'm doing all these interviews now. Just had Rob Moore on. Got another exciting one already in the can that's very good. So nickdixon.net for all the full episodes and insane amounts of content I'm putting out now. Paul Cox Comedy. Yeah, I found it like a question, but it wasn't. It was more of a statement. You just looked at me.
Yes is the answer to that.
All right. And we've got so much to discuss because so much has happened, Paul. As even today, as we were about to record, we even have to change it all because Canada is kicking off. Not really kicking off, but they've, for some reason, elected Mark Carney, hated at the Bank of England, did a bad job. So, that guy, he's the guy to save us. And Pierre Poilievre, which is how we may pronounce it, has not only lost the election, but he's lost his seat, which is extraordinary, in Ottawa to a bloke called Bruce Fanjoy, which has got to sting even more that you've lost to someone with a comedy name.
I mean, Bruce is bad enough, but Fanjoy, come on, Polyev, what the fuck's going on, mate?
It's a sort of 70s porn name, Bruce Fanjoy, or he could be a game show host.
Yeah.
It's a bit too on the nose for game show host. They'd have to change it to something less ridiculous. Bruce Fanjoy in Ottawa, and so he's lost his seat. And basically, this was due, everyone seems to say, to Trump and the response to Trump. And Carney sort of riding the anti-Trump wave, which I guess was more easy for him to do. He was more convincing in that role. Probably hadn't been very pro-Trump, but he was more, aligned with him politically in terms of policy. But he wasn't that aligned with him. And so people think he sort of messed this up. He probably couldn't decide, from what I can gather, how anti-Trump he was going, whereas Carney was just like straightforwardly, I'm the Lib candidate who hates Trump. But they were 25 points behind under Trudeau. So it's extraordinary that he's managed to do this just through Trump threatening them. And Carney said in his victory speech, as I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country, our women. I've added that last one, but that's basically what he's gone with there, Paul. They want to rape and pillage our country. You're not supposed to say that word on Facebook.
Pillage
on YouTube. Pillage, yeah, pillage is out. I don't know why I thought we were on Facebook. President Trump is trying to break us so America can own us. That will never, ever happen. So look at that. I mean, he's just gone with the full-on patriotism, which is such an unlikely figure for that because he's a sort of interchangeable, managerial, global, progressive elite cog, Paul.
Yeah, using essentially nationalism to win votes, which is fascinating. Great thing about Mark Carney is he's got zero experience in politics, running a political party, running a country, running anything other than a bank or a business. So they've essentially voted in someone who's incredibly ill-experienced. Polyev was very experienced, has been in Parliament fighting Trudeau. We owe Polyev
MP since 2004.
I know, exactly. 21 years of political experience came down to this moment, and he lost to Mark Carney. And we'll get into that a little bit. But we do owe him a debt of gratitude, Mark Carney, because he essentially ended Trudeau, and Trudeau was devastatingly bad for the right-thinking human on planet Earth.
But isn't he just the same, with a slightly less good haircut?
Well, yeah, this is the problem. Well, one of the advantages in politics of being a complete unknown is people don't know, and they'll go, it's very easy at this point to blame Donald Trump. And my initial reaction was, for fuck's sake, this tariff stuff with Trump and this 51st state stuff with Trump has really scuppered the Conservatives in Canada. And then I'm sure to some degree it has. And, that argument will play out over the coming days and weeks. But as I was saying to you off air, this is a country that voted in Trudeau 3 times. Voting him in once, bad. Voting him in twice, mental. Voting him in 3 times, well, you got what you voted for, you dickheads. So the fact that they've gone with Liberals now, despite having the opportunity to change tact a little bit, doesn't surprise me entirely. If we just calm down for a minute and forget what people are calling a shock. If you look at the statistics, they've not won by a huge amount. They've got to get 172 seats to win the majority. The last time I looked, they were on 168 versus about 146 for the Conservatives, and they will get the 172. But they've taken from the NDP and they've taken from some People's Party. They've not really. Both parties have gained. Both Conservatives and Liberals have gained. It's just the Liberals have managed to maintain a slightly larger gain, and they were starting from a head start. Let's not forget. What's remarkable is if you play this back maybe 6 months, end of 2024, with Trudeau right on the ropes, getting smashed every week by Poilievre in Parliament, getting smashed, everywhere essentially, and Poilievre looked like he was on for a sure thing. And then Mark Carney stepped in at the last minute, just as Trudeau stepped out, and I don't think any of us really thought at that point that things were going to change greatly. There was a trajectory, and it was in the Conservatives' favour, but it just didn't go that way. And it felt to me like the Trump thing has had a definite impact, because it doesn't matter how much support there is within Canada for Trump, and it's debatable how much there is. Let's say maximum it's 40 to 50%. That's not enough to turn. That's not enough for Trump to do what he did, and it helped the Canadian cause in any way. Essentially, Trump did a lot. I'm not saying maybe Poilievre didn't lose, but Trump didn't win anything there. And, a sovereign state like Canada, someone comes in and says, I'm going to make you a state of my much bigger country. We wouldn't like that. Let's be honest. There's been lots of playful chat about could Trump be our president as well, and perhaps the UK could become the 51st state. But if you stopped and thought about it for a long weekend, you wouldn't want it. Think of the implications of that. It'd be terrible, losing your sovereignty. You don't vote for Brexit and then give yourself away to the United States, basically. And I'm not surprised that many Canadians, particularly Canadians that were probably thinking, I'm not going to vote Liberal anymore, I'm going to vote Conservative, were put off by that. But I would still argue that Poilievre lost this rather than Trump lost it. Poilievre was, I didn't watch... Unfortunately, and I was thinking this today, I just didn't watch it closely enough. It didn't feel like a big deal because there was so much else going on in the world, Nick. But look, we've got what we've got. That's democracy. And maybe Canada, as the Telegraph say, have made a huge mistake.
Telegraph does say that. Michael Torb says that. Always dangerous to blame voters. He says, how foolish are Canadian voters? They've just kept a politically inexperienced Prime Minister and largely discredited Liberal minority government in power because of their frustration with the US president. And of course that is an argument, but you call them dickheads there, which will get us in trouble with Canada. And off air you were saying they have intercourse with moose, which I thought was inappropriate. But
you have to use stepladders. That's what I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's dangerous.
Yeah, it does seem, we're not experts on it, but it does seem very frustrating. But you can't really blame the voters, because that's what everyone tried to do over Brexit. And it's just that's how they felt. And Trump spaffed it. Does Trump care? He's not a fan of Poilievre. Maybe he wasn't bothered, but he said he's not a MAGA guy. He's not a Trump guy at all. So maybe he just didn't care. But it seems strange for Trump to want to have a clear enemy in Canada rather than a sort of partial friend. And as you said, on the 51st state thing, yeah, it was never serious. That's the thing. Most of Trump's threats aren't serious. But of course you wouldn't want it. But does anyone really believe it? Yes, the tariffs were real, I suppose, but even the tariffs were negotiable, as we've seen. There's a pause. There's not on computers. Oh, whoops! Apple sent all its stuff to India. Well, hang on. So there's a lot of fluff on the tariffs as well. It's all, for some reason, Trump just wanted to bang on about tariffs and freak everyone out. Yeah. It's hard because now I'm in this weird thing where I've been the most pro-Trump person ever, but now we get attacked sometimes on GB or something for me, like if we attack Trump. But I'll just call it as it is, even on Trump.
Well, it's because we're critical thinkers, Nick. I suffered the same fate last Wednesday when I was on Headliners. We had a story about tariffs and a story about Trump's attitude towards Zelensky, and that's, we'll cover that in a bit, and that's changing. But I think he's performed badly on both. I mean, I'm yet to be convinced about the tariff situation. To me, that just seems like. I mean, I don't want to steal any of your commentary, Nick, because you've nailed it. Really, the fact that he did it, I don't think either of us thought were a great idea. But then just to blink made it twice as bad. So we ended up with something that was bad made twice as bad by the blinking, and it hasn't seemed to achieve anything other than arguably making some people very rich because they would have known which way the markets were going, and that's going to leave a bad taste in most political persuasions' mouths to some degree. Now, of course, we talk about groupthink on the left. There is groupthink on the right as well. Of course, there is this groupthink within human beings. And one thing I won't do, and I know you don't do, Nick, is I don't go, I love all the stuff Trump's doing with Doge, and I love that he beat Biden, and he's doing a lot of good stuff, but I'm not going to not analyze each thing that he does just because I like certain things. That's not how this works. Anyone who supports a football team knows that that's how it goes. You're a Man United fan. I'm a Pompey fan. If you've ever been on a forum, you all got the same aim in mind. So, you all support your team, let's say Team Trump, but there are nuances and things within that people disagree on, and that's healthy. And I think that should be the case. But I think the Trump tariff thing in Canada was maybe potentially a bit of a misstep, as was the 51st state. But I will say again, I don't think we could blame Trump for Canada voting for the Liberals again. It was very tight. They voted for Liberals 3 times previous to that with someone like Trudeau in charge. So the chances of them doing it again were still pretty high. If I'm sure, I don't know what the market said in terms of the betting markets, but I'm sure that they wouldn't have had just in recent times since Mark Carney took over. I'm sure Polyev wouldn't have been absolutely light years ahead because, the facts still didn't change, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I was starting to worry about your mic sound instead of listening at the very end. This is the problem when you're always trying to think about everything. It sounded more plosive than normal. I was like, is that going to distort on the recording? And then my mind's like, on that. I'm trying to do too many things. Sorry, Paul. But the thing that bothers me, I agree with you on Trump. You call it as it is. And you could be a fan of tariffs. Some people are, and that's fine. William Clouston from the SDP likes tariffs. I don't know enough about the economics of it. But one thing I do know is that Trump's given him an open goal here because Ursula von der Leyen is now saying she look forward to working with Ottawa to defend our shared democratic values, promote multilateralism, and champion free and fair trade. And guess who else gets to weigh in? China. They get to say that China is willing to develop China-Canada relations on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit. And China has not gone on with Canada, especially since this thing in 2018. There was a U.S. warrant in Vancouver about a senior Chinese telecom executive, and then Beijing, in response, detained 2 Canadians on espionage charges, and so they've not been getting on for the last 7 years. But now Trump's just giving them a sort of an open goal to say, "Oh yeah, we love Canada. We want a good relationship with Canada." So bonkers. Do you want to quickly mention that, Zelensky? Now I forgot about that, even though I mentioned it to you, and then I forgot the meeting with Trump and Zelensky just because you did mention it. So now I probably should briefly cover it. I'm trying to find the best picture of it. This is a decent picture on the sun. But it was this iconic image. Trump with his hunch posture he always has, this sort of hulking posture, sat on the outskirts of the Pope's funeral, which was a bizarre time to do the meeting. But I think clearly what happened, they had that awful meeting in the Oval Office, and then Zelensky said, "Mr. Trump, we will meet on edge of the Pope's funeral." That's the best place, Paul, to try and resolve anything, is at a funeral of a major figure.
Well, it might focus minds. I mean, obviously, there's an element of humour about what you're saying, but something like death and the end of somebody's life and going to a celebration of that, which the funeral is supposed to be, I guess, it does focus the mind somewhat. And I think what's probably focusing Trump's mind more than anything is he's getting absolutely nowhere with Putin and Russia. Nothing's changing, okay? So we said this right from the beginning. Trump's stance, both of us at the beginning were like, well, I certainly was. I stood back and thought, this is a bit harsh on Zelensky. This is a bit harsh on Ukraine. Now, before everybody shouts at the podcast, "Oh, Paul, you don't understand." No, I'll admit that I didn't understand all the intricacies of that relationship and what Zelensky was doing in the Ukraine, but I was actually willing just to sit back and go, okay, Trump seems to have some sort of strategy here, and I don't like it because I feel like the Ukraine were invaded and that Zelensky is never going to capitulate, no matter what you might think of him. You know, he his ethos is strong man. Okay, so whether you hate him or like him, that's his ethos, and he wears the same clothes and he won't dress up for anybody, and he's Ukraine through and through. That's what he wants us all to believe. So let's just take that for the case of the debate. And he's never going to capitulate, even to someone like Trump, because Ukraine's history and Ukraine's future and the people of Ukraine and their lives depend on him getting it right to some degree. And Trump's basically saying peace at all costs, which most of us want, by the way. But most of us want from a position where we're not living in Ukraine, we're not living in Kyiv, and we're not being attacked, etc., etc. So I was willing to sit back and accept Trump's strategy. But it didn't work. It had to work very quickly for it to make sense. So, for instance, he had to get a peace deal. There had to be a ceasefire. We had to see a drop in deaths. We had to see a drop in attacks. We had to see Putin at the table saying, this is the red line, and then the negotiation beginning. As far as I can tell, and I read the papers most days of the week, I've not seen any of that. And I think that's starting to weigh heavily on Trump's mind. And now he's starting to, his rhetoric is, well, maybe Zelensky's not so bad, and maybe Putin is not so good, and that Russia need to come to the table more. So I don't know what to believe anymore, but I would suggest that the way to peace is probably to get both Ukraine and Russia to the table rather than just one of them, Nick.
Yeah. It's the first time we've heard Trump say something like, Putin's stringing me along. He didn't use that exact phrase, but very similar phrase. He said tagging me along or something. So it's the first time we've heard him say something like that, acknowledge that he might not be, Putin might not be the honest broker we all assumed. He even said Putin stop on a post, didn't he? And he said there's no reason for him to be shooting missiles into civilian areas because Putin seemed to up the bombing, if anything. Now Putin's called for this 72-hour ceasefire. So let's see. I tend to think it's much harder to end this war, isn't it, than to have prevented it. Trump did prevent it by being there. The Russians didn't know what he was going to do. They couldn't factor him in. They waited till America was weaker, till they went in. He was very good at preventing it, but now it's started. Much harder to end it. And you've got to be prepared to back up your words. With Trump, with the China trade war and with this, you sort of wonder, is Trump all bluff? But what can he really do as well? You can't just go bombing people willy-nilly. So it's very, very difficult. So once it started, very difficult to end it. But yeah, this was the most positive we'd seen. And Trump, seemed to be a bit nicer to Zelensky and a bit less nice to Putin, was put in very simple terms. So let's see. I don't have loads to say on that. Leo Kurz would have an hour on it, but he'd know all the drone serial numbers. I don't have loads to say on that because I want to get on to domestic stuff that I care about. Well, I mean, it's all very important. But I really am interested in this Farage thing. So Farage has agreed to go in with Lord Glassman on an inquiry on the grooming gangs, but it's not a separate inquiry. It's to push for a national inquiry that we all want, of course, or I don't want to speak for the listeners, but I think many of us want that. So you may have seen Jess Phillips in the PMQ. She was doing this sort of usual, I talk to these people every day. I've spoke to them this morning. I will speak to them today. And she sort of tears up a bit. It's like, all right, Jess, I'm sure she's doing some good stuff, but it's sort of like, this is you can't say that I'm not working on this. Rupert Lowe asked her, would she be prepared to help with his inquiry? She even said, I will work with anybody who's prepared to. So she's even worked with Rupert Lowe. But then Farage has sort of done a smart thing here by getting involved with a Labour peer and calling for an actual proper inquiry, because he was criticised by Lowe, wasn't he, for calling for saying we'll get an inquiry with reform, which then didn't happen. So Rupert Lowe's been savaging him about that. But now by calling for an actual proper inquiry and getting cross-party support, it seems like a good move. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I watched that. It was a special question yesterday afternoon, wasn't it? Early evening, late afternoon. Jess Phillips and I forget the Conservative guy. Oh my goodness.
Chris Philp.
Yeah, Philp, of course it is. Yeah, on manoeuvres, Philp, and it was quite robust, as it should be. We're discussing rape gangs here, and what I found most fascinating about it was, and of course it's within the previous inquiries that have taken place, there has been talk within the conclusion of cover up, but it doesn't get spoken about a lot, particularly about by our government, of which Jess Phillips is a cabinet member of, and she said, "Yes, I'm fully aware of the cover up that was reported in the previous inquiry." Well, I think that's got that's very interesting. I don't think that we've seen people talk about that enough. My problem with Jess Phillips is not that I don't think she's doing her best. I think she gets too full of hubris at times. When she's under attack, or when she could detach herself from it personally, not emotionally, because none of us have detached ourselves emotionally from this, other than some dickheads that deny that it's happened. 2 dickheads today so far. Sorry, listeners and viewers. But she could detach herself and say, she personalizes it and she makes it about her, and then she reacts in a way and said, I am doing this. She's not in an interview. She doesn't need to prove anything. She needs to prove one thing: the government are going to do the right thing. Okay. I'm sure she's right. I'm sure there's so much stuff that goes on in the background. I'm sure she hears all sorts of harrowing stories, and good for her for getting involved, and good for her for trying. But it's when she talks with such hubris about herself and how much she's doing, and how we know that she hates the Tories, and we know that she loves herself, and it's like it's not time for it anymore. These are rape gangs. Okay, it's as simple as that. It's like war. We either come together, as one great big coalition against the rape gangs, or we're fragmented and you're accused of covering up and being supportive of the rape gangs. It's as simple as that. There's no it's binary. It's black and white. There's no grey areas with this. There's none whatsoever. We know that. We know that, we know that this is fact. We know that this has happened, and it's happened on an industrial scale. And it's one of the most shocking things that's ever happened in this country, perpetrated by a culture that we've imported in against the incumbent culture, by the way. So she doesn't need to say those things. She might argue that Philp doesn't need to say the things that he said, but he does. In opposition, he does. She just needs to say what we're going to do, and we're going to come together and do it, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's too much pressure on this. I think it will eventually happen. I think we're only at the beginning of dealing with this. You may think it's a massive story and everyone knows about it, but how much is the man on the street? They are aware of it. But I think this won't be anywhere near dealt with until everyone on the street, whether they follow politics or not, knows the names of everyone involved in the cover-up. Like they know names like Hitler and Himmler and Goering. Even if you don't follow politics or history, you know those names. We should know exactly who the villains are here, apart from all the obvious perpetrators who involved in the rape. And there's so many of them, the rape and torture, there's so many of them. A lot of them have weird names that are hard to know. We should know them, and we should also know everyone involved in the cover-up. And we should just... And I think that's coming, but it's still a long way off. There's so much pressure now to have this national inquiry. Lord Glaston, as I say, Nigel Farage, and they're obviously 2 very different parties, Labour and Reform. Chris Philp, as you've said, Katie Lamb, Tory frontbencher, she's very good. She seems very good so far. So too much pressure on the government. Andy Burnham's already called for it. So, I mean, they're going to have to do something. Starmer doesn't want to. It's going to be very ugly. Of course, the government doesn't want to be associated with it, but they have to, because as you say, it's a cross-party issue. It has to be solved now. It's disgusting that it went on, that it's still going on. And
all the time it goes on, we're going to assume that the people that are not willing to have a public inquiry are doing so because they themselves could be implicated in some way. Not in the rape, okay? Not in the rape. I mean, in the cover-up, in the obfuscation, in the distraction. Don't look over there. Don't look over there. Look over here. Look at this thing. Because they know that they presided over it. Keir Starmer, more than anyone, I would hasten to add. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know. But he has held a number of positions of power where he could have done things to have changed the course. I am sure of that. And that hasn't happened. And now he's in a position as Prime Minister where he can definitely do something. He could say it doesn't matter what it costs, because it doesn't matter what it costs. We are going to do it, and we're going to do it properly, and we're going to find out. And the reason we're going to find out is because we don't want it to happen again. Simple as that. It's still happening.
Yeah.
It's still happening.
I mean, Jess Phillips claims like she wants to do stuff that's effective on the ground, and there's already been her implication is always that it's not effective, and that you don't understand, you're not close to it. Maybe there's something in it. Maybe she must know something
Well,
about
yeah.
it. But the fact is, I don't think politically they can withstand it anyway. Even aside from the efficacy, I mean, look at the Telegraph. 94%, if you click on their poll, say a fresh investigation is essential, versus 6% no, a further inquiry is not needed. So it's got to
It all
happen.
feels like politics, Nick, and it needs to go out the way. We talked a little bit about Trump earlier and the way that he goes in, whether you like what he's doing or not, and I've talked about some of the Zelensky and tariff stuff. What Trump does is he says very loudly up top what he wants, and then he works back from it. What politicians do is they worm their way around the bottom in the hope to get somewhere. I'd much rather Trump's tactic and approach on something like this. We want to eradicate this forever. We want to find out who's responsible for the cover up. We want to find out who the perpetrators are, and we want to protect past, present, and future victims. Simple as that. And we're going to do it at all cost. And it doesn't matter what Jess Phillips or anyone else's career, what happens to Jess Phillips or anyone else's career. We are going to do it no matter what. Trump would just come in and say, this is terrible. It should never happen again, and steam in. And of course, there'll be then there's the argument, oh, well, you can't do it this way, and there's lots of nuance. But it doesn't matter at that point. The cat's already out the bag. It's like, this is terrible, and you work your way from there. And essentially, you meet the point you would have done anyway. But if you go the other way, you get nowhere really quickly, and people still get raped.
Yeah. And, I mean, yeah. So it's good that there's some movement on it. Maurice Glassman is blue Labour, so it's not like the left of Labour have joined with Farage. But then again, Andy Burnham has called for it, so...
Yeah, shrewd. I mean, shrewd. It's not the right word to use. Hopefully, he morally is morally in support of what he's saying. So it's not shrewd. It's not politique. It's just common sense. And I don't want to come down. There's all sorts of reasons to come down on a personality like Jess Phillips, but she's in a very difficult position here. But the solution is so simple. It's a bit like immigration and the boats. The solution is actually simple. Now, the difference between where we are now on the rape gangs and where we are with immigration is immigration, we're tied to all sorts of international law and treaties and agreements and policies that successive governments have tied us into. With regards to the rape gangs, all we've got to do is point out who did it, why it happened, who covered up. Have we imported this culture? Was it incumbent already? It was imported. Of course it fucking was. I'm so sorry. This just drives me absolutely mad. We just need pure transparency with it. It's not like the immigration thing. The solution is simple, but there's legal things stopping us delivering a proper solution on immigration at the moment. Unless you went all out and went, I don't care for law, and we're doing it, which arguably we probably should do in some cases. But with regards to the rape gangs, there's so much within our jurisdiction that we can do. We can just stop it. And we can just hold people accountable and say it's these people, and these people help them.
Well, Douglas Murray in the interview with Stephen Edgington for GB America was, I think it's still called that, was good on this. I mean, whatever you think to him on Israel and so on the Smith debate, he was really good on this. He just said, America's taking people's visas. We should take people's visas if they're involved in these gangs. We should deport people. Why not? I'm paraphrasing slightly, more or less what he said. We should be doing far more. Let's see. But the other thing Farage did, and the question is Farage sort of tacking back to the right again? He moves around a lot. We never know. One day he says mass deportations are impossible. Another day he seems to imply he will do them. Seems to move around depending on the day. But the other thing he's done is vowed to create a minister for deportations. And the Sun says to boot out foreign criminals as he slams invasion of migrants. So some people were a bit surprised by this. But if you looked at it carefully, it wasn't necessarily anything that he hadn't already said, that he was talking about anyone who comes in will get rid of. But there's still a bit of ambiguity about the people who are already here. Can you send them out? The million people, however many it is, absurd amount of people, can you get rid of them once they're here? He's probably talking about deporting them immediately when they arrive. And I think it was Ben Obese-Jecht, he replied to him and said, well there's no difference between your minister for deportations you're proposing and the existing border security person, except, of course, we're obviously not securing the border. But it certainly is a gesture. I mean, of course, the criticism of Farage that he is all about gestures, but as a gesture, it's not a bad idea to say, yes, I'll have a minister for deportations. But is it Farage moving just before the local elections, which actually we haven't even. We'll talk about probably, I guess, next week. But they're looking very good in all polls for the local elections. So maybe this is a shrewd move ahead of those.
Maybe he's not asking for anything that we don't need, though, is he? And the point was he invoked Blunkett, a name we haven't heard for a little while in his speech about this. And the reason he did so is because 25 years ago, when the Home Secretary was David Blunkett, there was no need for a Minister of Deportations because at that point, UKBA and Border Force didn't exist. We had the Immigration Service, and the Immigration Service was filled to the brim with highly educated, multiple language speaking immigration officers that had jurisdiction to refuse people at point of entry. A lot of people don't realise this, and the reason I understand this is because a family member of mine is a retired immigration officer, and he comes along to some of my comedy clubs, as do some of his ex-colleagues. They're all in their sort of 70s and 80s now, and they talk about the good old days. Basically, it was within their remit to refuse someone based on a hunch, based on their experience, and they were paid more than they are now. And they spoke lots of different languages, and they travelled the world, and they culturally understood other cultures, and they understood, what was right, what was wrong, what was safe, what was dangerous. And if somebody came in at the point of entry, they could say, "It looks like you're coming here to work. You've got far too much money on you. You haven't got a visa. You haven't got a permit to work. You haven't got an address. What are you doing here?" And at that point now, somebody could say, "I plead asylum because," and as soon as they do that, they're in. And they're never statistically going home again. Whereas up until about 2003, an immigration officer could say, "I'm refusing you entry to the UK," turn them round, and in many cases, the UK would pay for their flight and they'd go back to where they came from. End of chat. So you didn't need a Minister of Deportations because you actually paid someone to do that for you right at the border. We don't have that now. It changed from the Immigration Service into UKBA, and then it changed into Border Force, what we got now. And what they did is they totally diluted that position to pay a lot less for people. So you don't really need to be qualified now. You just need to be able to follow a procedure and a policy. And that policy is essentially welcoming people into the country. Just come on in. And all you're doing is writing down their details. "Oh, yeah, lovely jubbly. Yeah, go over there and we'll find you a hotel."
So we didn't need all this before because we just had a bloke on the border saying, "I don't like the look of you, mate. You're out." I like that system much better. It reminds me of No Country for Old Men when the guy he's there, he's got no clothes, he's just got in his underwear, trying to get across the border. But then the guy asks him, "Were you in Vietnam?" Because he gets across. That's what it should be, Paul. Were you in Nam? You're coming in. If you weren't, you're out.
It was a very fair structure as well. And if they had a problem with it, 9 times out of 10, they had to fight it from the country they came from. So they get sent back home and they go, "Well, that was unfair, wasn't it?" And they might have had good reason for it to be unfair, and they'd have to apply it, from the country that they left, not in the UK, and they wouldn't stay here. And it was a system that worked. So under Labour government from 97 to 2010 or whatever it was, most of that time, the reason that immigration was lower than it is now is because we had an immigration service with qualified personnel that had the jurisdiction and remit to be able to do these things. Now it's not the case. The process, because we got the ECHR, and I guess we didn't have it to the same extent then. Basically, they're bound by human rights, and if someone pleads asylum, and by the way, there are certain countries in this world and where people are coming from that you're almost guaranteed to be let into the UK. And you will stay here. As soon as you go into that system, it's almost impossible to come out of that system and be sent back home.
Yeah, we've got these shocking rules about indefinite leave to remain. You just come in, then
exactly.
you got indefinite leave to remain. You get benefits, you can get social housing. Yes, and it changed because of the ECHR, which in itself is because of the
human rights issue, Nick, and it's not a human rights issue.
No, it's because of the Human Rights Act. It does go back to Blairism, as you say. One thing that was smart about what Farage did, and lots of people on my side have said do this for a while, is that he just said, we're not doing anything Tony Blair didn't do. We're just talking about the same numbers that Blair got rid of. Because over to win those shifts so much, it's seen as so radical to get rid of illegals from your own country. But of course, it wasn't. And Blunkett used to do mad stuff. I mean, Blunkett with the prisons, he wanted to get really tough on. There was an issue in a prison, and he wanted to. There's a whole story about how he wanted to send people in heavy. He wanted to. They were far more authoritarian in a sense in the Blair era of just bang, we're doing this. We don't see that now.
To be fair, he couldn't see the danger.
True. That is true because he was blind, was what Paul was going with. That's the level of the jokes we're doing now. Have a pop at the blind, Paul. You've already had a go at Canadians, famously the nicest people in the
I'm
world.
really sorry.
It's all right.
I'm really sorry to any of our blind viewers.
Nice. He's done it. He's doubled down there. You see what he did? I'm struggling. I haven't eaten enough, and I'm really hot, and I'm feeling a bit dizzy. And Paul's just taking advantage by doing a load of jokes that I would not normally allow on this.
You wouldn't
podcast.
allow, Nick. I'm sorry, mate.
This podcast is about pushing a far-right agenda with the illusion, but humanizing it through friendly banter to hide a darker agenda, Paul. All right?
Sorry. And
we can never reveal that, but that's what it's about.
As many of our viewers and listeners will know, I'm partially deaf now, so I've got my own disabilities.
Yes,
so
Paul
I'd like
had
to apologise.
an issue with his ear. If you want to know about that, go to nickdixon.net. We went into it on depth on Dixon Coxco Mental, our other podcast. We don't go into those kind of shenanigans here. People on YouTube won't tolerate it, but basically he's half deaf now, and so he's allowed to now mock the disabled because he is.
I'm not. It's
That's
satirical.
his position.
I'm not even sure it's satirical.
And he's allowed to mock anything that people do with a moose because he's done it. He's been there, done that. If you were going to have intercourse with an animal, you wouldn't pick a moose.
Not a chance.
It's insane. Have you seen how big they are?
Oh, seen how big they are, mate? You try taking one.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, what level have I taken this to, Nick? I'm sorry, mate.
You're cruising for a bruising with a moose. That's all I'm saying. Canada.
Yeah, you are.
But they're hardy people up in Canada. You've got to credit them. They've got big beards. It's very cold. They play ice hockey, and they try to bum mooses.
You can suck a moose off stood on tiptoes.
You can, but should you is the question.
Tune into Dixon Coxco Mental on Thursday, where I discuss.
You need a stool. Guys,
I'm sorry.
Be careful. That's all we're saying. It's really a health and safety issue.
It is. But we do need a deportations minister in the same way we didn't before under a Labour left-leaning government.
I like how you got back into that. You won't get that on GB News. I don't know why I'm dissing my own employer. Hang on. You won't get that on Talk TV or something.
Yeah.
Speaking of migrants, Paul, which is what we like to talk about a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That I can pretty much say that sentence at any point in the day. We probably are speaking about them. Speaking of migrants, we got this Serco story, big story. Completely insane. Serco are there getting away with helping destroy our country. So Sunday Telegraph, landlords will lap up Labour's rent homes to migrants, but Britain will pay the price. That was an interesting piece. Actually, before that piece, there was a funny one that said that Starmer is renting houses. I want to find the headline. It was basically Starmer rents his houses, and it made it sound like Starmer was doing it himself, like he was renting his homes. Here we go. Starmer to rent out homes to migrants. And I was like, that was in the mail.
3-bed semis.
Yeah, that's so good. It's like, look, it's in it's Upper Cubic area. It's close to local amenities, like Starmer rent out his properties. That made me laugh. But I see what they're talking about because here's the Mail. Starmer to rent out homes to migrants. Government now pleads with landlords to host asylum seekers with 5-year guaranteed rent deal offered. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. There was this list on Twitter of all the places they're going to try and disperse. They call it dispersing migrants. It's like a drone attack, I said, because it's like we're just going to spaff migrants into every area of the country. Places like South Lakes, where I'm from, we don't want migrants there. It would destroy the place. Lancaster, where I used to go a lot, it would destroy these towns and villages and cities, but it's going to be throughout the whole country. And Serco, I mean, you can understand it probably better than me, Paul, but they're giving landlords this guaranteed 5-year rent scheme, and they pay bills, they pay council tax, they pay for repairs, and the idea is you just give landlords a sort of deal that's impossible, offer you can't refuse, to use the Godfather's language. They make it so easy for them, and there's even rumours, and I don't have this officially, but I've seen tweets about people called up. We've already got tenants, and they say, "Oh, would you get our migrant tenants instead? We'll give you 25% more rent, and we'll pay for everything." And so they're making these impossible to refuse deals. It couldn't really be more disgusting. I mean, if you were trying to destroy the country or trying to push us towards civil unrest, this is exactly the kind of thing you would do. And it takes a lot of moral courage. It takes a John Mappin to say, no, we don't want your migrant deal, because as this piece in the Sunday Telegraph said, you make it impossible for... I don't say you make it impossible. I say you still have to say no, even if you're a landlord. But this piece says that it makes it basically impossible for them not to do it. It says they'll pay for utilities and council tax, and when they're close to a second mortgage at the current rates, what can you do? He says it might not be an admirable trait to look for the easy buck, but I'm sick of the difficult, miserable slog of being a landlord and the tax I have to shell out. So I'll take any pain relief right now, even if that includes housing asylum seekers. But I know it isn't. This isn't good for Britain. This is the secret landlord in the Telegraph. He's called Paul.
So much here. First of all, Serco are a government contractor, and they have hundreds, if not thousands, of government contracts to deliver to help deliver policy just of this nature for the government. You know, they do the government's bidding for them. Now, whether we like it or not,
You have a slight issue behind you, Paul. You might want to fix. Your doors come up. Someone's.
Oh. Sorry.
Someone was
that my daughter?
I think
or something?
so. I think so. Yeah.
So right in the middle of a point.
Maybe she needs something. I'm not necessarily saying just slam.
No,
I don't
think. I don't think so. I don't think so. She would have said, you know, she's a teenager, mate. She's Gen Z. They're just demand. Anyway, so Serco are government contractors who basically someone's got to do it. So if you and I were a G4S or a Serco or someone like that, and Serco said, you can bid for this contract where it's 5 billion quid, and for that we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And by the way, X, Y, and Z is take care of 38,000 asylum cases that are based in hotels currently and are going to be moved out of those hotels and relocated into homes with private and public landlords across the Northwest, essentially, largely across the Northwest. Some of that 38,000 are going to end up in God's own country of Cumbria as well, Nick. So you'll want to talk about that, I'm sure. An absolute disgrace. So first of all, someone's got to do it. It just happens on this occasion that Serco are the devil, okay? But that's their business. That's capitalism, and that's what they do. And there are other companies like it.
Hang on. It's not capitalism if the government's giving you contracts and saying we'll just pay extra and we'll cover all your bills.
Good pushback.
That's crony capitalism. That's like China stuff.
It is, but it's been going on for decades under the two types of government that we've had, i.e. blue and red, i.e. uni. So it's happened under the Tories. I'm not sticking up for Serco. And
no, but you're saying they're just taking a Home Office contract. Of course they're going to do it. It's the Home Office that we should be focusing on more.
Yeah, we should do. I worked for Serco, which Nick isn't saying because I spoke to him about it earlier. I wasn't sure whether I was going to. For a long period of time, I actually worked for Serco. And I worked on military and defence-based contracts, whereas this is a government-based contract. So I have some understanding of what's going on here. And, you know, when I first started working for them in my late teens, early 20s, I didn't appreciate quite everything that they were involved in. And I have a much greater understanding now. But all that aside, okay, so you can look at Serco as the devil. If you're a fan of Churchill, well, up until very recently, 2022, Churchill's grandson was actually the CEO of Serco Worldwide.
I know,
Rupert Soames. So there is quite a Rupert Soames is the
your door's open again, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know what she's doing. By the way, not everyone can see. I don't know what's going on there, but she'll have to wait. But we'll do it. We'll do it in between. Sorry, this shouldn't happen.
I was going to ignore it, but then it was creating too much distraction.
So
it was like that famous viral clip with the.
So, dear viewer, listener won't have any idea. There's a small window in which you can see me. Outside of that window is another door where people can get to me if they want to. But I'll speak to her in a minute. This doesn't happen on The Rest Is Politics. This doesn't happen.
Well,
Rory Stewart doesn't deal with it. If
this was a defence contract, you wouldn't be doing this.
I'll be in all sorts of trouble. So, but the crux of the matter is, and I'll leave it open to whether people want to hate Serco or not. There are companies, 3 or 4 massive companies that do this across the UK, and it's so interwoven. Rupert Soames, for instance, is now the president of the CBI. So the people that sit at the top of these companies are often in the mix, the uni-party mix. I forget Rupert Soames' brother. Look him up. He was a Conservative peer.
Well, there was Nicholas Soames, wasn't there?
Nicholas Soames. So Nicholas Soames is his brother. This is very much jobs for the boys, and always has been right at the top of those businesses, and I'm sure the same exists at G4S and other companies of that ilk.
Someone said, "What about Churchill's legacy?" Imagine you were Churchill, and some people don't like Churchill now, but many people still think of him as our great hero. And then you knocked out all these kids or whatever relationship they are. Was Nicholas the grandson? Oh yeah,
I
and so
believe.
is Rupert. So
Yeah.
just look at the decline there.
So these,
Or
and
some people would say totally consistent. The Churchill haters will say that's totally consistent. He sold out the empire, now they're selling out the country. And others would say, look at the decline.
he Rupert Soames is now the president of the CBI, which is the job, by the way. They interviewed Rees-Mogg when he was about, I don't know, 20, 21 years old, and they said what his aspirations was, and it was to be the president of the CBI. And the reason he would have said something like that is because this is the establishment aristocracy type jobs. You're not getting these jobs if you're me.
That was
You're
not
probably
your
not getting them
ambition
if
at
you're
12
you.
years old, was it, Paul?
No, my ambition at 12 years old was, I don't know, I think it was to learn how to hotwire a Ford Cortina, the gear especially.
It was to deck Gary because he's been messing with me all week and he's a twat.
Yeah, there would have definitely been a Gary. I don't know if I could have decked him though. But at the heart of this story are 38,000 men, not men and women, largely men. Fighting age men that have come here from countries that we've told they can send all their wrong-uns to us. And they're currently in hotels at the taxpayer's cost, and now they're going to go into rented accommodation at taxpayer's cost. And by the way, when they go in there, they're not just going to have their rent paid for, they're going to have every utility bill paid for, their council tax, all maintenance for 5 solid years.
That's what I'm saying.
Now, there are lots of people out there that are quite hard up, working incredibly hard and quite hard up. And, we'd like to say, as there are cases of people, there was that guy in Devon, I think, who owned a castle. They wanted to, there was
John
a hotel.
Mappin. Paul, do you listen to anything I say? That's John Mappin who didn't go along
sorry,
with it.
mate. I don't listen to anything you say. Sorry. I'll answer that question. No, I don't. No, I was. You did mention it. And yes, so great. Sorry, mate. I went off on a tangent and forgot what you'd said. So we know there are cases. However, I would challenge anyone to stop for a minute. And if someone like Serco came to you and you own 10 houses in Manchester and they said, we are going to give you 5 years rent way above the market rate, there are people out there that will quietly, and it's why in the Telegraph this is a secret landlord, will quietly just go, do you know what? That's going to solve all of my problems for 5 years. I'm going to take it. So at the heart of this is the immigration issue. Also at the heart of this are people that are being taken advantage of. But right at the very start of this is the immigration problem, irrespective of Serco and the hotels and the landlords and the government taxpayer money. All of this can be prevented if you stop them coming in. Simple as that. This wouldn't have happened in 2003 when you had immigration officers. It will happen now because we've got the ECHR. If we stop that, we don't need to worry about the billions that are going from the government into the pockets of Serco and then out into the pockets of what some will call unscrupulous landlords. So we forget where this starts, and it's easy to blame the end things that's happening. But at the end of the day, I don't know, Nick. I don't know how. I genuinely would have pause for thought if I was a landlord and someone said, here's above market rate for the next 5 years, everything taken care of. Maybe I would take it.
Well, you'd be destroying your country, and
I would be destroying my country.
Creating a terrible country for your children. So they've got to think about that.
I'm playing devil's advocate, not because I would ever be in that position, but I just think that there's a lot to consider with something like this. Now,
you're right. It's too late. I mean,
it's way too late. It's all over.
It's too late when you brought the migrants in, and you're saying it wouldn't have happened in the past. In the past, apparently, people couldn't figure out how to get across the sea. Now they realize they can just come across the sea. I mean, that's the big thing. So I still don't know how you would have, even in your old system, how you would have stopped that, because no one was facing that. I mean, I think it's easy to stop, but I can't say any of the ways that I would stop it, probably without getting arrested. But it's not that hard to stop a bunch of dinghies. But even Blair didn't have that problem, did he? So that they hadn't figured out the sea was crossable at that point.
But he signed us up. He helped sign us up to this stuff that we're in now.
Of course.
So, whilst he didn't have the problem, he signed the bits of papers which led to the problem. And now, as much as you and I...
his solution is, lo and behold, ID cards, the solution to absolutely everything if you're Tony Blair.
Yeah. And it's not, by the way. Because the horse is bolted now. The horse is bolted now. So they would use it for nefarious means. I guarantee it. There was a stronger argument back in 2000. No, it was 2008, 2009, wasn't it, before the coalition government, when Lib Dems and the Conservatives came together. And famously, Clegg threw out the ID card thing along with other things. But it's too late now. It's too late. So this is all inevitable.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have to give away so much money. You don't have to go, oh, crikey, whatever it costs. Because whatever it costs should apply to things like a national inquiry on rape gangs. It shouldn't apply to looking after the people that are going to do the raping.
Correct. And what I wonder, Paul, and I may be naive in this, is how it's going to work with voting. Now, is the idea to get these people settled and get them voting? Because otherwise, you look at that map, dispersing them everywhere. You go, anyone that sees migrants in their town who hasn't had them before, I don't care who they are or what they say publicly, they will all privately vote against that. And therefore, any government that's done this will get obliterated. But is the idea that long term these migrants, you get them voting, and then Labour are kept in, or if they lose this time they come back? This is what some people have said to me. But certainly short term, surely migrants in the town equals not voting for whichever government did that.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory, that, by the way.
Well, no,
it's absolutely not. Fortunately, and whilst it doesn't feel like it, those people are still the vast minority. And this is where that whole logic falls down from a government trying to do this perspective.
Because they were doing it in America, didn't it? I don't know if that's what's going on here, but I'm just saying, if that's not what's going on, how do you not get spanked electorally for? Of course, you've got these. Here's one little caveat: you've got some people, and like these independents who are all about Palestine. They will instinctively vote. They see themselves probably more aligned with people coming into the country, and anyone that hates the country or anyone that's recently arrived and they don't like the country, so they identify more with that in many cases. But if you identify as British and feel British, you go, hang on, why are these people coming in? And that includes many settled immigrants who've worked hard, and they say, hang on, we don't want these people coming in. By the way, you speak to a taxi driver from Cyprus or something and see how he feels about recent other immigrants. So there is immigrants and immigrants. But anyone who identifies as basically anti-West and anti-Britain, and we have a lot of these people now, presumably vote, they don't mind about the migrants coming in. They want to destroy the country in various ways. But anyone who identifies as, I don't want to destroy Britain, who are these people, will vote against.
Absolutely. Without any shadow of a doubt. And as much as the previous Conservative government deserved the trouncing they got, I think that's going to pale into insignificance when it comes to 2029 and what this Labour government are doing now. Because at each turn, they've taken a misstep. And what we're going to end up with is this huge immigration issue that just has not. Smash the gangs is not working at all. We heard yesterday that we hit the 10,000 in boats mark in 2025, but before the end of April, when that number was hit on the 24th of May in 2024. So you can blame the weather. You can say that the conditions are favourable, etc., etc. But what you can't do is say that you've done anything to stop it. You've done nothing to stop it. They're trying to stop it at source. They're saying
smash the gangs.
The gangs are the source. Now, I think it was Bev Turner on GB News when I was tuned in on the radio yesterday said, these are paying customers, these boat people. The reason they're happy to pay is because the service works for them. They get onto a boat, they can get across into the UK, and it's working for them. The minute you can stop that, the minute that service doesn't work for them anymore, they won't pay the £10,000 per entrant to the boat to do it. So it's all very well saying you smash the gangs. We've given France £500 million to help us out. But the more you look into that, France are doing certain things within shallow waters on the beaches in France. They are slashing these dinghies and saying you can't go anywhere. But in doing so, they're being outnumbered by the migrants and the gang leaders, and they're being physically attacked. And a lot of them will just be contractors who are now going, do you know what? I don't care. I want to go back safely to my family. And they're not in a life or death situation, but the boat people are.
Why can't you give life imprisonment to the guy driving the boat who probably has some contact with the smuggler? And even if he doesn't, then you don't hurt women and children, but anyone driving the actual boat across, you say life imprisonment as soon as you land. And obviously I'm toning down what I actually think for the podcast. Obviously I'd give him the death penalty. Death penalty as soon as you land for the guy driving it. What doesn't that end it immediately? Am I wrong, boy? Is that too simple?
No, it would end immediately.
Probably there's some reason you're not allowed to do it. I just think it's a great idea. I mean, because we don't have the death penalty, it will be number one. But I'm saying, bring back death penalty. You say, anyone who arrives, let's just be really calm and say you go to prison, not even for life. Let's be really moderate and say the guy driving the boat immediately goes to prison upon landing. Who's going to drive him then?
There's a whole raft of things you could do.
No pun intended.
Largely illegal. you could stand on the White Cliffs of Dover with all sorts of things preventing these boats coming across. Now, you can't do that because we're a law-abiding democratic country, okay?
But
We're
my
signed
prison
up
idea
to...
is law-abiding, isn't it? You
Yeah,
say
no, I'm
it's
not
illegal to
suggesting
be a
that.
migrant. You're the guy driving the boat. Some sympathy for the women and children, but the guy driving the boat who's a bloke who's maybe in league with the people, may not be, but he's driving the thing. Stick him in jail.
And I think that's what it would take. You don't have to push it. You don't have to push the envelope too far. So your idea probably works. If you look at what they did,
mate.
if you look at what they did in Australia, if you look at what they're doing, I think in a similar period, hundreds of thousands of people went across the Mexican border into the USA last year. This year, 6,000 have. Every single one of them's been arrested. So the problem on the Mexican border for the US, whether you look at some of these cases and you think some of it's unfair, minute percentages might be unfair. The vast percentage are absolutely fair and right, and it's solving the problem. So if you, Nick, and I stood, at Dover stopping these people coming in and did exactly what you suggested, immediately arrested everybody and did whatever we had to do to stop them doing it again and sent them back, it would very quickly stop.
Yeah, and apparently the reason we can't is the ECHR, but the source of that is the Human Rights Act and our interpretation of the ECHR. And other countries, even if they're in Europe, like Denmark, aren't as beholden to the ECHR as we are over here because we have the Human Rights Act as well. That's my understanding. Someone can correct me. And I get that from Douglas Carswell's milestone.
We signed. There was a 1982 3 or 4 Act, Immigration Act. There was the ECA.
Was it 81?
Yeah, it was early 80s. And forgive me, dear listener and viewer, and Nick as well. Nick will find out on his phone now. But there were lots of things we signed up innocently to in the early 80s and after World War II that are helping.
81, yeah.
Are helping these immigrants get across to the UK now, because we signed up to the ECHR and a number of sort of European Union based policies. We are now in a position where we can't even turn people back. We can't even turn people back. So the law is against our side. So one thing we do know is under Keir Starmer, nothing's going to change. He believes in the law and he thinks he can fix this via the law the way it is now. The law's an ass. The law now is not helping us. We follow the law now, they'll just keep coming in. We have to either change the law or ignore the law. Simple as that.
Yeah. Oh, Carswell cited 1971. There is an Immigration Act. There seem to be like multiple. Immigration Act 1971.
Millions of them, I expect.
He says 1971 Immigration Act grants the Home Secretary broad powers to regulate entry, reinforced by the UK's exit from the EU. So why aren't we doing it? He says we need an order in council under Section 32 of the Immigration Act 1971 to amend immigration rules. So we need to do this. I recommend Douglas Carswell's milestones on my podcast with him on this because he's outlined ways you could actually do this. It just involves tearing up a load of Blairite legislation. 1971 isn't Blair, but broadly it involves tearing up a load of bollocks legislation.
Yeah, and and I think in the end that's all you can do. It's all you can do. You get this is
as Bono once said.
It's a desperate time. It calls for desperate measures. You just stand there and go, the law is the law, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to smash the gangs. What's getting smashed is innocent young white girls, mate. You fucking idiot.
Nice. Good ending. All right. Let's end the free one there on a rape joke. Essentially what that was. We've also said the word. You're not supposed to even say it on YouTube. We said it multiple times. We talked about having sex with moose. I said mooses once, but that was a joke. I think the plural is moose. Paul knows because he's been on a stool
for hours. In sort of late spring in Alberta as well. It's cold. It's not as warm as you think, and you're out there and you're trying your best, but it's not working.
That's where Peterson's from. Hey, have you ever tried to suck off a bloody moose in Alberta in the winter? It's no joke. That's serious, man. And starts crying. And I think about the men working on the infrastructure and the moose. No other podcast, ladies and gentlemen, and other will talk about the 1971 Immigration Act, then pivot swiftly to inappropriate jokes about moose and things you may do with them. That's all we got on the free, and we got the paid stuff on nickdixon.net for the absolute legends, and we are doing very well. It's gone way up lately because I'm pumping out a huge amount of content, largely about the moose community, but there's a huge amount of content on nickdixon.net, full interviews with all sorts of people. Just did one with Rob Moore, very interesting, multimillionaire
Really
property.
good. That was really good.
Genius. Thank you, Paul. And you can find Paul at Paul Cox Comedy. He's got his own Substack as well now.
I do.
Learning from the master. And but thank you very much. Hopefully this will be the correct episode if you're listening on audio, and if you're on YouTube, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.